climate. And they mean climate by, in terms of not weather, but the attitude and energy that each of us bring collectively and connectively to the meetings. And so, being me, I immediately thought of 3 other words that I thought would be more interesting than creating club climate, and that was challenge, and comfort are 2 of them, okay? Challenge because if you give a speech that's a canned speech or something that's easy, well then you could have a robot or a hologram come up and do it. Thank you. But you don't want to be too far outside your comfort zone, or you'll just stumble and you'll forget to say maybe the most important thing that you want to say. The 3rd word that it reminded me of was Clement. Now Clement is from the Latin word for mercy or forbearance. I love the word forbearance because it actually has a feel behind it like, okay, I want to do something, but I'm not going to do it, like there's a tension involved in it. But clement is actually a term that we use for the weather or the climate. The climate is clement, okay? Now in Sacramento, in the afternoon this week, I'm not sure if it's appropriate for human habitation. If you're going to do any work outside, it's going to be 105 today. And so clement means you can actually be outside and live there. Okay, but it also means mercy. Now, in the past, every Tuesday morning when I jump in the shower, I'm singing. I've got sunshine on a cloudy day. When it's cold outside, I have the month of May. And then it goes on something like, I don't need no money, no fortune or fame. I've got all the riches that a man could claim. And then usually my wife peeks her head in the shower and says, I guess you'd say, what could make me feel this way? Toastmasters. Talking about Toastmasters. So that's what I used to do on Tuesday. But then about 4 weeks ago, there was a speech given. Jai did this really great speech on a professional speech giver, okay? And I took it really seriously. It was a great speech, the way you summarized it. But part of it cast a dark cloud over me. And it was something that the professional speech maker had said. He said that only 20% of what you say is going to be remembered. Now, you know me, and so many of you, you give your all on the speeches. And to think that right off the bat, 80% is going to be forgotten. Well, I talked to a good friend of mine who's a litigator. And I talked to a relative of mine who's actually, she has a PhD in administrative education. And they both agreed with me that they thought that was a little pessimistic. And so then I thought, well, I remember Patricia's speech last week. Those of you that were here, can you still remember her and her brother sitting on the edge of that pickup with a Rottweiler grabbing her brother's leg as they, were delivering newspapers? And then those crazy blackbirds that were chasing her, and finally she had to put a hat and gloves on, and she went with her friends and was zigzagging to school to try to avoid the blackbird. So I thought, well, gee, is that right? Is in fact what we say going to be lost almost immediately afterwards? And what if you happen to remember the 20% that really wasn't that important to the speaker? My God, we're doomed. And so I thought about that, and my father-in-law used to say, you got to be smarter than the dog. Now, I can't be smarter than a professional speech giver because he actually gets paid to give speeches. And I thought about it. I said, well, this is really interesting at Toastmasters. I pay you guys to let me speak. I pay, what is it, 40-some odd dollars every 6 months? And this is kind of an interesting situation. And so I want to thank you, Toastmasters, from the bottom of my heart for doing that for me. It's the only way I could get people to listen to me. So anyway, there's this 20% rule that I had to deal with. And so I thought, well, how am I going to deal with that? And so I was thinking about it, and there was a rabbi named Jesus, and he took 613 laws from Leviticus and boiled it all down to 2. Love thy Lord their God and love thy neighbor as thyself. And so in this, the part that I had to speak on today, that had to deal with creating the climate at our club. It had 32 different things that you could mention about the protocol that we need to do. How do we behave? You know, we greet a new guest. We congratulate somebody on a speech. You know, we're quiet during meetings. We don't speak unless we're recognized, things like that. And I thought, well, gee, do you think I could get it down to 1? And I couldn't. I could get it down to 6. But then I thought more about it, and there's something in art called minimalism. And we know where minimal comes from. That's the Latin word meaning the least, okay? And what minimalism is repeating the same thing over and over again. So I thought, okay, if you're not going to remember 80% of what I have to say, well, great. I'm simply not going to say that 80%. I'm just going to pick 1 or 2 things and repeat it over and over and over. And then I can say, somebody asked me, how'd your speech go today? Fantastic, they got it, you know? And so minimalism is doing that. And to give you an example, Ravel's Bolero, do you know Ravel's Bolero? It's da 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 dun, da da da. Do you know it? Da 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 da. Somebody want to help me? No. Well, he goes on for 16 minutes with the same tune, with some variations, and it builds to an incredible crescendo, and then has an ending which isn't as great as the crescendo, but that's what happens. So I thought that's what I would do. I would take what I had to speak to you about and boil it down from 32 or whatever it was down to just a couple. Now, part of it was learning environment, and I figured if I talk about that, that's going to really distract things. Nobody's going to remember it anyway. I was really interested in membership interaction. Now, I come from the touchy-feely era of the 60s, so I'd be more interested in something like that to begin with. Membership interaction. Boy, and how much do I need to explain to you about that? You're all adults. You all know what you're up to. You all seem to me, from the experience I've had with you over the last 8 months or so, to be really nice people. I mean, why repeat what you already know? Now, member is a really interesting thing. There's really an important thing that has to do with membership. It's from Sanskrit. Boy, that's weird. You know, Sanskrit is what they used to speak in India 2,000 years ago. It's still, I think, the sacred language that they use in religious texts. It comes from the word mamsa, which means flesh. Now remember, I'm the old wizened English teacher, you know, so I'm going to be going back to words like this and trying to keep you alert, even though you're on cruise control because this is your last semester in high school. And it's a distinctive part of the whole thing, okay? I mean, our fingers and hands are members of our body. Our head is actually a member of our body. And really, to function as a full, thank you. This is great. See, now this is an example of creating the best climate that you can create, where I'm in need, being low tech. I mean, look, this is high tech for me, a bulldog. I don't even know how to do bulldogs. Thank you. It's a distinct part of the whole. And that's something that I wanted to make sure that you knew, that each of us is really different. No 2 people are going to speak the same. We're all really critical for the health of this organization. We're all critical, no matter what it is that you have to say. We really need to hear it, or the connection that we have together won't be made. I really need to hear your voices, because you let me hear, you let me speak mine. Now, 2 things that members need to do is they need to prepare. Now, that doesn't mean you're really fully prepared. I'm still writing this speech. That's just how I work. I just can't do a full speech, totally prepared and then try to memorize it. Some people are really good at that, but not me. So prepared just means be ready. Even if you're not fully prepared, be as ready as you can be, because we'll catch you. We're Clement. We're merciful people. Okay? You can make that stretch. You can take that challenge up. And the other thing is to give support to people. Okay? So you do the best you can. When you have a speech, you try to give it, even if you're not 100% prepared. If you have a role to play, you try to do it, even if you haven't done it before, because other people will help you. We talked today, earlier, about helping people recognize they're doing things that don't help them speak, okay, well, or as well as they could. That's support. The evaluation that we get when we speak is support. The mentorship that some of the new people get is the support that we need. Okay, now what about guests? Okay, guest comes from Indo-Euro. Well, what's Indo-Euro? It's not even a real language. It's a made-up language that migrated from, it's when the people migrated from India to Europe, they brought a language with them. The word is ghostis. That's interesting. Guest comes from the word that sounds like ghostis. And it's a stranger, a non-member, receiving hospitality. And so that's kind of interesting because the things that you're supposed to do that are part of the 32 rules, thank you, before the meeting, you're supposed to be friendly to the guest. During the meeting, if they have questions, you're supposed to be friendly to the guest. And you know what you're supposed to do after when the meeting's over with the guest? You're supposed to still be friendly. Now that's pretty interesting because I notice we do all of those, and Janet, you're one of the people who really does a good job of making sure everybody has that. Now, one of the things that I did want to talk about is being a guest. That's really important. It requires there being a host. And I know when I get up to speak, suddenly I'm not the host anymore. You guys are the host. I'm the guest. I mean, I'm not a member anymore. I've suddenly become a guest to the group. Okay? You've allowed me at your table to eat your time. And so there was one thing that I really wanted to make sure I communicated to you. Actually, there's one thing that I want to communicate to you a lot of times. One day I was in a savanna. A savanna is a big grassland area, no trees, huge grassland. I was with a group of archaeologists, field archaeologists. And the savanna was bracketed on both sides by mountain slopes, okay, in the distance. And as we began to move into the savanna, we all kind of separated so that we were working individually by ourselves. And so as I kept walking forward, I noticed in the distance there was like a mound or a slope, some hills. I couldn't quite make it out, but there was a rise in the distance. And so I kept moving towards it. And I was walking, I was kind of struck by the fact that even though the grass was moving by the wind, there was no sound made. I couldn't hear any of the usual insect, animal sounds. I couldn't hear any sounds of birds. It was really quiet. But I kept finding myself drawn to this rise in the distance. And as I got closer to that rise, I realized it's getting smaller. And that's when I should have known that I was dreaming. Okay, because the rise should have gotten bigger. When you're approaching the mountain, suddenly it takes on a bigger size. So finally, I see myself and I'm looking down, and what I saw in the distance as a rise was really the form of a female body that was immured in clay. I didn't call anybody else. I just looked at it and I began to dissect the clay off the body that was there. And I noticed that, well, okay, is there a person alive in here? So I began to try to work the clay off, and it began to slough off very easily under my fingers. And when I was able to remove enough, the eyes looked at me and moved. The person was still alive, and so I began to work on the face a little more, and I'll be darned, it spoke to me. And it said, what you do to another, you are really doing to yourself. That's the point I wanted to make. Can you help me?
Yeah, sure. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in service to others.
Jana?
One way empathy manifests itself is in courtesy. Don't let your colleagues down. If you say you're going to do something, do it.
Lene?
If you have no ability to empathize, it's difficult to give feedback. It's difficult to help people improve.
Narinder?
By the measure you meet, so will you be met.
Jeanette? Janet?
How curious are you about the person next to you?
Grace?
Connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel that they are being seen, heard, and valued.
Dave?
To practice courage, compassion, and connection is to look at life and the people around us and say, I'm all in.
And I wanted to give this to you. Would you read that last one for me?
Whatsoever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them.
Thank you. That's minimalism. I'm sorry, Pat.
Love thy neighbor as thyself.
The most obvious one. And as members, the way we do that is to recognize what each of us does, recognize the achievements that each of us make. And finally, to consider each other, to notice if the other person is with it today, if there's something they may have that you pick up, they need to have answered, if there's something else that you need to do. So recognize achievements and consider the humanity of the person that you're with. And so why is it that at the end of a toast, the people will say, "Hear, hear"? I don't know. And why is it that we say, "Listen up"? I have no idea. I want to conclude this by reciting the last stanza to a poem of a teacher of mine who I had actually 50 years ago when I was a senior in college. Yeah, 50 years ago, that long. And it goes something like this. Let us be each other's voice. Let us be each other's truth. Let us be each other's audience. And in doing so, we become each other's fame and recognition.